is not on the chart. It's not on any chart. It's mimicking his voice. It's learning.
Tonight, we are opening files related to the most isolated workplaces on Earth, offshore oil rigs. These 6 accounts have been cross-referenced with company incident reports, Coast Guard transcripts, and the personal logs of crew members who never made it back to shore. What you are about to hear is a presentation of the facts as we have found them. Before we begin, ensure you are subscribed to the Nightmare Log and have notifications activated. What we uncover here is not for the faint of heart, and you won't want to miss what we discover next. Case File NML 441, The Thing in the Drilling Mud. Date: October 17, 1998. Location: the Petra Fortuna, a semi-submersible rig operating in the North Sea. The protagonist was Marcus Lee, a mud engineer. His job was to monitor the chemical composition of the drilling fluid, a thick, viscous mixture used to lubricate the drill bit and bring rock chips to the surface. The system was standard: a series of vibrating shale shakers to separate solid from liquid, connected to a network of pipes and mud pits. The inciting incident occurred at 2:17 hours. Mr. Lee was running a routine sample when he noticed an anomaly. The mud returning to the surface was far colder than it should have been. His thermometer read 4 degrees Celsius. The surrounding water was 12 degrees. Furthermore, the mud had developed a strange, sweet smell, like rotting fruit and petroleum. He assumed it was a contaminant from a new geological layer and began adjusting the mixture. The slow burn began over the next 36 hours. The cold mud persisted. Then, the shale shakers began bringing up unusual material. Not rock. It was a fibrous, black substance, like matted hair or seaweed, but it was tough, almost metallic. When analyzed, it contained biological matter that did not match any known deep-sea organism. Then, the sound started. A faint, wet, sloshing sound would echo from the empty mud pits when the circulation pumps were off. Crew members reported hearing what sounded like something large moving through the pipes. The reveal happened when a junior roughneck, against protocol, opened an inspection hatch on a primary mud return line to clear a suspected clog. He was not prepared for what was inside. Later, in a state of shock, he would describe it to Mr. Lee not as a clog, but as a nest. A pulsing, wet mass of that same black fibrous material, and at its center, something pale and multi-limbed recoiled from the light. Before he could scream, a jet of freezing cold, sweet-smelling mud erupted from the hatch, striking him in the face and chest. He was rushed to the infirmary with severe chemical burns, but the fluid evaporated, leaving no residue for analysis. The aftermath was a total shutdown. The entire drilling operation was halted. The company's official report cited a leak of industrial coolant and a toxic algae bloom as the cause of the Roughneck's injuries. The entire event was written off as a costly but explainable incident. The injured man was airlifted to shore and later quit, refusing to ever speak about it again. The Nightmare Log verdict. The official report lists the cause as equipment malfunction and environmental exposure. We have classified it as a deep-sea biological intrusion. We believe the drill string pierced a previously unknown subterranean cavity, and something from within it was brought back to the surface. Something that found the dark, cold, liquid environment of the mud system to be a perfect new home. But the dangers of the deep are not always brought up from below. Sometimes they are already there, waiting. Our next case involves not what is in the water, but what is underneath it. Case file NML 518, the Uncharted Island. Date, July 3, 2011. Location, the Oceanic Endeavor, a mobile jackup rig in the South China Sea. The protagonist was Captain Elias Vance, a 30-year veteran of offshore operations. The rig was being moved to a new drill site based on coordinates provided by the parent company. Their charts, both digital and paper, showed nothing but open ocean for hundreds of miles. The inciting incident was a sudden, violent jolt that shook the entire rig at 4 o'clock hours. Alarms blared. The crew rushed to their stations, believing they had struck a container that had fallen from a ship. Captain Vance ordered a full stop and sent a team to assess the damage. The initial report was confusing. They were not taking on water. The impact seemed to have come from below. Sonar was deployed. It showed the seafloor was still over 300 meters down, but it also showed something else. Directly beneath them, the sonar painted a massive, solid object rising from the abyssal plain to within 10 meters of the surface. An object that did not appear on any map. The slow burn was a mix of confusion and dread. The rig was, for all intents and purposes, stranded. They could not move without risking catastrophic damage to the legs. Captain Vance tried to radio for assistance, but found all communications, including the emergency satellite phone, were being jammed by a powerful, static-like interference that seemed to emanate from the structure below. A lifeboat was lowered to investigate. The two-man crew returned white-faced. They described the structure as not rock, but smooth, featureless stone, like polished basalt. And it was warm to the touch. The reveal came that night. With the rig silent and dead in the water, a new sound began. A low, resonant hum that vibrated through the metal of the rig, felt in the bones more than heard by the ears. Then, the lights in the water appeared. Dozens of soft, greenish lights circling the rig far below. Crew members who leaned over the rail reported seeing shapes moving in the murk around the unnatural island. Humanoid shapes, swimming with an unnatural, jerky grace. They began to attempt to climb the rig's legs. The aftermath was a desperate escape. Using welding torches and high-pressure water jets, the crew fought off the climbing figures, which retreated when exposed to intense light. Captain Vance, in a moment of desperation, ordered a controlled, emergency retraction of the jack-up legs, knowing it would likely cause severe damage. The sound of metal scraping against the unnatural stone was deafening, but the rig broke free. As they limped away, the sonar showed the massive structure descending back into the depths, as if it had never been there. The nightmare log verdict. The official report, citing faulty sonar and mass hysteria brought on by the stress of a grounding incident, led to Captain Vance's early retirement. We have classified this event as a sighting of a transient geofront. The entity beneath them was not an island. It was something else entirely, and the figures in the water were not trying to attack the rig. They were trying to warn them off. Or perhaps they were trying to get back on. Case file NML 509, The Diver's Message. August 12, 2006. Location, the Sea Sentinel, a deep-water drilling platform in the Gulf of Mexico. The protagonists were a three-man saturation diving team, living in a pressurized chamber on board for a 28-day shift. Their task was routine: inspect and repair the underwater wellhead assembly 500 feet below the surface. The diving bell was a standard model, equipped with lights, cameras, and two-way comms. The inciting incident occurred during the third dive. Diver Carl Jacobs was outside the bell, cleaning connectors, when his voice came over the comms. He said, calmly, "Hey guys, there's a message down here." The dive supervisor, monitoring from the surface, asked him to clarify. Jacobs replied, scratched into the side of the wellhead casing. Letters. Deep ones, like someone took their time. He was asked to read it. There was a long pause, filled only with the sound of his breathing. Then, he read a single, 8-digit number. 03111984. The dive supervisor immediately recognized it. It was the personal employee number of Michael Shaw, a diver who had died on a nearby rig during a catastrophic blowout. Exactly 22 years prior to the day, the slow burn was a descent into static. Jacobs was ordered back to the bell immediately. As he turned, his light swept across the abyssal plain. In that brief moment, the camera on his helmet captured something. A figure standing upright on the seafloor. It was clad in what appeared to be an antiquated, heavy diving suit, its brass helmet dark and faceplate opaque. It was impossible. The pressure at that depth would have crushed a suit like that, and it was just standing there. Jacobs didn't see it, but the surface crew did. As the bell was being winched up, the comms filled with a low, wet static. Faintly, buried within it, a voice could be heard whispering the same string of numbers over and over. The reveal happened when the diving bell breached the surface and was locked onto the deck. The recovery team opened the hatch. Inside, they found divers Jacobs and Mendoza conscious but catatonic, staring blankly at the wall. The third diver, Reeves, was missing. His diving suit was found neatly folded on the bench, his helmet filled with freezing cold, briny seawater. The internal camera on his helmet showed only 30 seconds of footage after the bell began its ascent, a view of the closed hatch, and the sound of his own panicked breathing, followed by a gurgling scream as the feed was flooded and cut out. The aftermath was a company-wide cover-up. An official inquiry concluded that diver Reeves had suffered a pressure-related psychotic episode, had somehow removed his suit and opened an emergency valve, flushing himself out into the ocean. The deaths were ruled a tragic accident. The other two divers were given generous settlements on the condition of their silence. Jacobs never spoke again and now lives in a long-term care facility. The nightmare log verdict. The official report lists this as a case of extreme pressure-induced psychosis and equipment failure. We classify it as a Class 3 deep-sea echo. We believe the divers did not encounter a ghost, but rather a temporal fracture, a place where a moment of extreme trauma repeats itself endlessly and can sometimes impress itself upon the present, with deadly consequences. A rig is a city of steel, and like any city, it has its forgotten corners. Our next case did not come from the dark water below, but from within the rig itself, from a place that was never meant to be opened. Case File NML 572, The Ballast Tomb, January 29, 2015. Location, the Titan Explorer, an aging drill ship operating in the North Atlantic. The protagonist was Anya Sharma, a structural engineer conducting a mandatory integrity inspection of the ship's ballast tanks. These are massive, empty compartments in the hull used to control the ship's stability and draft. Tank 7C had been sealed and declared off-limits for over a decade due to structural concerns. The inciting incident was a routine ultrasonic thickness test on the exterior hull plate adjacent to Tank 7C. Ms. Sharma's readings were bizarre. The steel was far thinner than it should have been, as if something had been scraping it away from the inside. Against protocol, but driven by professional concern, she decided she had to visually inspect the interior. She assembled a team, and with the captain's reluctant approval, they began the lengthy process of unsealing the heavy, rusted hatch. The slow burn began the moment the hatch was cracked. A smell washed over them, not the expected smell of stale air and rust, but the overwhelming, sweetly metallic scent of fresh blood and salt water. The air coming from the tank was cold and moist. Their lights, powerful beams designed to cut through darkness, seemed weak and swallowed by the immense black space within. The walls, which should have been straight steel, were instead covered in a strange, lumpy, crystalline growth that glittered in their lights. And the floor was not visible. It was submerged under several feet of dark, still, freezing water. The reveal was in the water. As Ms. Sharma directed her beam across the surface, it reflected off two things. First, hundreds of small, pale fish, all blind, all dead, floating belly up. And second, a shape, a human form, floating face down, wearing the faded orange coveralls of the rig. It was the previous chief engineer, who had disappeared without a trace 12 years earlier during the same inspection that led to the tank being sealed. As they watched, horrified, the body slowly turned over in the water. Its face and hands were gone, completely removed, and its torso was covered in the same strange, sharp crystals that grew on the walls. The aftermath was swift and absolute. The hatch was resealed immediately. The captain made it clear to everyone present that speaking of this would result not only in termination, but in criminal charges for breaking safety protocols. The official record states that Tank 7C was found to be in acceptable condition and was resealed as a cost-saving measure. The body of the chief engineer remains entombed within it. The official report is a complete fabrication. We have classified this as a saltwater mimicry event. The crystalline growth is an unknown organism that thrives in darkness and cold, metabolizing metal and biological matter. It is a parasite that alters its environment to create a preserved, nutrient-rich tomb, and it is still growing inside the hull of the Titan Explorer to this day. Case File NML 637. The Glow in the Core Sample. November 2nd, 2020. Location: the Arctic Promise, a state-of-the-art ice-breaking drill ship operating in the remote Pechora Sea. The protagonist was Dr. Lena Petrova, a geologist. The rig had just extracted a core sample from a record depth, over 5 miles below the seabed. The sample tube was made of reinforced titanium alloy, and the contents were handled with robotic arms in a sterile lab environment. The inciting incident was the initial scan of the core. As the robotic arm passed the sample through an X-ray spectrometer, the readings went off the charts. The machine detected an element, or more accurately, an isotope, that did not match anything on the periodic table. It was hyperdense and emitted a low level of radiation that was both constant and complex, almost like a signal. The core sample itself, when the outer layer of rock was carefully scraped away, revealed not more stone, but a smooth, obsidian-like material that pulsed with a soft, internal blue light. The slow burn was a silent, scientific panic. Dr. Petrova ordered a full quarantine of the lab. The radiation, while strange, was not immediately harmful, but it had a bizarre effect on electronic equipment. Computers glitched, displaying corrupted data. Digital clocks ran backward. Security camera footage from the lab showed moments of static where the lab technicians appeared to move in jerky, stop-motion flickers, though they reported no such experience. The most disturbing effect was auditory. Those in or near the lab began to hear a faint, high-frequency hum, a sound that seemed to inject thoughts of profound loneliness and emptiness directly into their minds. The reveal came when Dr. Petrova, using a microdrill to extract a minuscule sample of the glowing material, accidentally pierced its surface. There was no explosion. Instead, the hum stopped. Absolute silence fell for 3 full seconds. Then, every single light on the rig, from the powerful halogen towers to the tiny LEDs on the coffee makers, flared with a blinding, blue-white intensity and burned out simultaneously. In that instant of total darkness, every person on the rig, without exception, experienced the same vivid hallucination, the sensation of something vast, cold, and ancient turning its attention toward them, noticing them for the first time. Then the emergency generators kicked on. The aftermath was a military-grade extraction. Within 18 hours, an unmarked helicopter landed on the rig. A team in full protective gear, with no insignia, seized the core sample, all of Dr. Petrova's data, and all the lab's hardware. They debriefed the entire crew under the strictest non-disclosure agreements. The official report listed a catastrophic electrical fire and a minor chemical spill as the cause of the blackout. The official report is a deliberate obfuscation. We classify this as an extraterrestrial/subterranean contact event. The core sample did not contain it was a vessel, a battery, or perhaps a beacon buried deep in the Earth's crust. And for a few moments, when it was opened, the rig wasn't a rig anymore. It was a signal fire in the dark, and we have no way of knowing what heard its call. Our final case takes us to the most brutal environment on the planet, where the cold alone can kill you. But for the crew of this installation, the cold was the least of their worries. Case File NML 701, The Shadow on the Ice. February 14, 2018. Location: the Polarnaya Zvezda, Polar Star, a fixed drilling platform attached to the sea ice off Russia's northern coast. The protagonist was Ilya Volkov, the facility's meteorologist. The platform was in the midst of the polar night, a months-long period of perpetual darkness, with temperatures plummeting to -50 degrees Celsius. Their only light was the aurora borealis and the rig's own powerful floodlights. The inciting incident was a blizzard. A severe storm cut off all satellite communication and visibility for 6 days. When it finally cleared, Ilya was conducting a weather survey from the outer deck. He scanned the ice flats with his spotlight. Something was wrong. The ice for a radius of about half a mile around the rig was no longer smooth. It was scarred, crisscrossed with deep gouges and trenches, as if a giant, frantic animal had been digging at it. And at the very edge of his light, he saw a figure. A tall, impossibly thin humanoid shape, blacker than the surrounding darkness, standing perfectly still on the ice. He blinked, and it was gone. The slow burn was a siege. Motion-activated security lights around the perimeter of the rig began to trigger constantly, illuminating nothing but empty ice. External microphones picked up sounds, a dry, scraping sound, like stone on stone, and a low, guttural clicking that seemed to come from multiple directions at once. The rig's husky dogs, kept in a kennel on the ice, went silent. When a crewman went to check on them, he found them huddled together in a corner, unharmed but whining, their food bowl untouched. Frozen solid in the middle of the food was a single, three-toed footprint, larger than a human head. The reveal was not visual, but psychological. The crew began to suffer from shared nightmares of being watched from the darkness by something that stood on legs that bent the wrong way. They reported seeing movement in their peripheral vision, slender, shifting shadows in corridors that were empty when they turned to look. The entity never approached the rig. It didn't need to. It was isolating them, preying on their minds, letting the crushing emptiness of the Arctic and their own fear do its work for it. The aftermath was a rescue. When communications were restored, the crew's desperate pleas for immediate evacuation were so frantic and inconsistent that the company sent an icebreaker to retrieve them, citing extreme polar psychosis. The crew was airlifted out. Before leaving, Ilya Volkov took one last photograph of the rig from the helicopter. In the image, the rig stands alone under the aurora, and there, on the roof of the highest module, is a tall, thin shadow, looking up at the departing helicopter. The official diagnosis was mass hysteria brought on by isolation and extreme conditions. We classify this as an encounter with a psionic predator, an entity that thrives in desolate places and feeds on terror. It did not want to breach the rig. It wanted to turn it into a cage. The crew wasn't evacuated. They were extracted from a hunting ground. The shadow on the ice is still out there, waiting for the next long night to fall. These 6 cases from the log, from the cold mud to the colder ice, demonstrate a terrifying truth. Our reach has exceeded our grasp. We venture into the oldest, darkest places on Earth, places that have never known light, and we drill. We pull things to the surface that were never meant to be found. And we are reminded, every time, that we are not the apex predators on this planet. We are merely visitors in a world that is far older, far stranger, and far more dangerous than we can possibly imagine. The horror does not come from monsters in the classic sense. It comes from the slow, dawning realization that the rules we live by, physics, biology, reality itself, are not absolute. They can be broken. They are broken every day in the isolated metal cities we build on the edge of the abyss. So what is the lesson here? Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Respect the old boundaries. Respect the deep and the dark. The most dangerous monsters are not the ones we imagine in the shadows. They are the real, unknown things that our ambition accidentally wakes from a billion-year slumber. If you have a case you believe belongs in the log, a story from the edge of the map, describe it in the comments below. Your account could be investigated for a future entry. To ensure you hear it, subscribe to the Nightmare Log and hit the notification bell. Stay vigilant, watch the water, and listen to the silence. This has been a presentation from the Nightmare Log. Until next time, try to sleep,